So in the last week or so, there's been 3 pretty major hiking search and rescue situations that have gone on in New Hampshire, specifically in the White Mountains. And these rescues are pretty involved, pretty intense. They happened on some of the highest summits and some crazy conditions, and I'm going to go over these stories in this video. So we have a man who wandered off the summit of Mount Washington after taking the Cog Railway, and he was found, unfortunately, dead 3 days later. That's going to be the first story. The second one is 2 hikers that went to hike the most difficult trail in New Hampshire, up Mount Washington, and got stuck up there and needed rescuing. And then the third story happened on Franconia Ridge. A hiker that was attempting a Pemi loop was up there and was suffering from really intense heat-related symptoms. So these are the 3 main stories I'm going to go over. I also have a story at the end that I'm going to go over real quick. I did see a thru hiker's tent get attacked by a bear up on Franconia Ridge. I just watched that on YouTube, so we're going to touch on that real quick. Before we get into any of these stories, I do just want to quickly thank the sponsor of this video, which is Element. Element helps make these videos possible, and it's generally something that I love and use on a daily basis. Element makes electrolyte drink mix packets, and it has everything that you need to stay hydrated in this and nothing that you don't. They taste amazing, and they don't have any sugar, which is great. Also, no artificial coloring, no gluten, just very clean ingredients, and it's a science-backed formula. If you're going on any big hikes, if you're going to be exerting yourself, if you're going to be sweating, replacing your electrolytes with something like Element is so important. Sometimes water's just not going to be enough, because when you sweat, you're actually losing so much sodium. So if you have one of these, you can replace that. That way you don't have to deal with the symptoms of being dehydrated. So the muscle cramps, the weakness, the headaches. If you haven't tried Element before and you want to, you can head to my link, which is drinkelement.com/Nahamsha. That way, with any purchase you make, you'll actually get a sample pack, one of these. So in the sample pack, you're going to get 8 extra sticks of Element thrown in with your order of all of Element's most popular flavors. Again, that link is drinklmnt.com/Nahamsha, and you'll get this free sample pack whether it's your first order or a repeat order. So it's a really good deal. And thank you, Element, for sponsoring this video. So this first story is obviously very sad because the man involved didn't make it. He ended up passing away. But this story involves a 79-year-old man from Jacksonville, Florida. On Wednesday, he took the Cog Railway up to the summit of Mount Washington with his wife, and he disappeared. So the last time anyone saw him was about 3:20 p.m. on Wednesday. His wife says he was on the observation deck up on Mount Washington, and then after that, no one could find him. New Hampshire Fish and Game was notified that a man was missing up there around 6 p.m., and they were actually able to make contact with him. They were able to call him on his phone, and he answered. He said he was lost. He didn't know where he was, and it didn't seem like he was very far away from the summit. Based on the description he was given, it seemed like it was going to be pretty easy to find him, so they started searching right away. After about an hour, he stopped answering his phone. It's assumed that it died or it got turned off. But yeah, going forward, there was no more contact with this man. At this point, they initiated a full-scale search up there for him. About 24 rescuers were searching, as well as a drone team was looking for him in the sky. At first, they weren't dealing with any crazy typical Mount Washington weather, which was great. The wind was light, the temps were mild, but as the night went in, the fog rolled in, and it did start getting a little bad. Because of this, late Wednesday night, early Thursday morning, about 2 a.m., they did pause the rescue, and they restarted Thursday at 6 a.m. So all day Thursday, the rescue teams came back to search for this man. The drone teams were back. Rescuers from AVSAR, New Hampshire conservation officers from all over the state were all looking in the places that they thought he would most likely walk to from the summit. The weather conditions on Thursday involved thick clouds and wind, but they kept searching through the weather, and they were really stumped on where he could be. They searched again all day Thursday. There's a quote from Fish and Game Officer Lieutenant Mark Obert Jr. saying, "Really, all we know is he had no intention to hike, but for some reason he went off the hiking trails and no one knows why." So later on Thursday, they paused the rescue mission again and they resumed on Friday. Again, this man went missing Wednesday afternoon. The temps since Wednesday have gotten a lot colder. It was low 40s with wind gusts making it feel like it was 32 degrees. So it was basically freezing up there. There were also high winds and it started to rain a little bit. Wednesday and Thursday, it seems like the rescue team had been searching a lot on the western side of Mount Washington, but on Friday they shifted and now they started searching the eastern southern side, and they split up and they were searching all the different trails, and eventually they did find the body of this man around 11 a.m. on Friday. Volunteer searchers found him about 400 feet off the Lionhead Trail in between the Alpine Garden Trail and Tuckerman Ravine Trail. I did pull up this graphic so we can get an idea of where the body was found. So this is the Alpine Garden Trail, this is the Tuckerman Ravine Trail, this is the Lionhead Trail. And so if we are in between the Alpine and Tuckerman, about 400 feet from the Lionhead Trail, I'm guessing that would put the hiker around this spot right here. So the Army National Guard Black Hawk helicopter was out on a training mission during this time, but they came over to help. They waited for a weather window to get close and retrieve the body. They were able to do that at about 1 p.m. Now, this, at the time of me recording this, it's Saturday. They found him yesterday. It's way too early to tell what exactly happened to him, but it's clear that he had fallen on a steep and rocky terrain. They aren't sure how he ended up in this spot, how far he traveled, how far he fell. It's pretty clear that this man was not a hiker. He had no map. I don't think he had any intention to hike. He really just wandered off the summit without telling anyone, even though his wife was up there. I was reading some comments from people regarding this story, and a few people did mention that there could have been some sickness involved, dementia, cognitive issues. Another possibility is that he was just up exploring the summit. There's a lot to see, a lot to do up there. And because of the clouds and the low visibility, maybe he just got disoriented. Maybe he thought he was going back to the observation area, to the summit, maybe to find his wife, but he was walking the wrong direction and just kept doing that. I know some people do take the cog up and hike down, but I don't think that was his intention that day, because I feel like he would have told his wife if he wanted to hike down instead of taking the cog. If we look at this map again that I made, this is the parking lot for the people that take the auto road up, and the Tuckerman Ravine Trail kind of starts or ends at around that parking lot. So maybe he went down to in the parking lot and accidentally got on the trail and just kept hiking down. I really don't want to draw any conclusions. I'm just kind of thinking of how this could happen, because it does seem like the rescuers were kind of stumped on this too. And also on this map, you can see just how steep that terrain was from the parking lot down the Tuckerman Ravine Trail. So again, we don't know how far he fell, but we do know he fell down. New Hampshire Fish and Game did say a lot of the rescue calls that they get happen because people in their hiking group get separated. And that's exactly what happened in this situation. If he had stuck with his wife while they were up exploring the summit, this probably wouldn't have happened. But huge thanks and appreciation to all the rescue teams involved, AVSAR, New Hampshire Fish and Game, the drone team, the Army National Guard. It seemed like everyone worked together. Again, just very unfortunate that he didn't survive. So we are going to move on to the next story that just so happens to also take place on Mount Washington. This happened on July 15th. 2 hikers from Canada went to hike Mount Washington via the Huntington Ravine Trail. If you don't know, the Huntington Ravine Trail is probably the most difficult trail in the White Mountains in New Hampshire. I've never hiked it. I'm honestly too scared to hike it myself. I would want a group of hikers that have done it before I even think of attempting it. I will do it one day, but just looking at pictures and videos of Huntington Ravine, it's a very steep, rocky section up Mount Washington, and it involves, yes, scaling the rocks, climbing. I wouldn't even call it a hike. You're basically rock climbing at this point. Anyways, these two hikers started hiking up Huntington Ravine Trail and got to a point on the rock ledges that they felt stranded, stuck, couldn't continue. They called for help, and they were actually advised to just shelter in place and wait for rescue teams to get to them, which they were expecting to take between 2 and 3 hours. The call actually came in at 7 p.m., which I feel like is very late. I don't know if they started their hike late or they just waited a long time to call for help, but I feel like if you're hiking Mount Washington, you want to be done by 7, not still hiking up. Anyways, they called at 7. At 9 p.m., a rescue team consisting of rock climbers got to the Alpine Garden Trail, which again, we talked about the Alpine Garden Trail in the last video, and they started descending into the ravine with harnesses and ropes, and they got to these hikers at 9:40. So yeah, just under 3 hours. They gave these hikers helmets and harnesses and helped them back up the trail, climbing themselves, but also using ropes when they needed to in the steep sections. They got out of the ravine at around 10:47, I believe. And right at the top of the ravine is actually where the Mount Washington Auto Road is. So they were able to meet up at the auto road and then get driven back down. It does really help that the auto road was there, because I'm sure that saved a bunch of time with this rescue. And it's also recommended that you don't hike down Huntington Ravine. I have seen trail reports of people doing it, but I think you have to be very experienced to descend a rock cliff like that. So right before I started filming this, I did a couple Google searches of Huntington Ravine Trail myself, just to see what the internet would say, because I'm sure people just doing a casual Google search of hiking Mount Washington might not know the severity of this trail going into it. And so when I Googled the trail, All Trails, a link to All Trails came up first, and this is the description that it says. This challenging loop leads you through Huntington Ravine, which is considered to be the hardest trail leading towards the summit of Mount Washington. This trail should not be attempted in wet conditions. Hikers should have experience scrambling and climbing steep, rocky terrain before attempting this loop. I honestly feel like that description doesn't put enough fear in the people reading it that it should. I don't know. I have experience hiking the Appalachian Trail, hiking all the 4,000 footers. I've done some steep sections. So honestly, if I read that myself and I didn't know anything about Huntington Ravine Trail, I would probably go for it. But if people do go and decide to hike Huntington Ravine Trail anyway, apparently there's this sign. Again, I've never been up there. I just saw this picture online, but there's a sign warning hikers to, like, do you actually want to hike this trail? And it gives a couple bullet points on what the terrain is like. But then again, honestly, I don't know if just a sign like that would make me rethink my decision and turn around, because there's signs all over Mount Washington saying home of the worst weather in the world, turn back now if the weather is bad, highest wind ever recorded. And I don't know, people just think those signs are cool. They take a picture, they continue on the way. So I don't know if this trail, just if you don't know anything, after doing a quick Google search, if it actually puts enough fear in people's heads. I don't know if I needed to go on this little tangent like that, but that's just my thoughts on this story. This third rescue story happened to a hiker who was attempting a 32-mile Pemi Loop backpacking trip with his nephew. He had started his hike on Tuesday. He was going counterclockwise, so he started at the Bonds and then was finishing up on the lower section of Franconia Ridge. He was in between Flume and Liberty, where his health was very much deteriorating because of heat-related symptoms. He was not doing well, and he didn't have any cell phone service. So he was not hiking alone. Again, he had his nephew with him. The nephew continued on the Pemi Loop down the Osseo Trail to get to Lincoln Woods to call for help. assuming that his uncle was out there continuing on, but just very slowly. So this hiker was determined to hike out on his own, but another hiker did come up to him on trail and called 911. Again, he was just deteriorating. So rescuers came out to help this hiker. The quickest way to get to him was up the Flume Slide Trail, which is one of the toughest hikes in New Hampshire. Not as tough as Huntington Ravine from the last story, but New Hampshire conservation officers were able to make their way up to him. At this point, they were able to help him down off the ridge, so he wasn't exposed anymore because thunderstorms were coming in. He was still not doing well. Rescuers were trying to rehydrate him, but it was determined that he would not be able to hike down on his own. They were going to hike down the Osseo Trail, so they needed a carryout to happen. So more rescuers came in Lincoln Woods up the Osseo Trail to begin the carryout, and they were able to carry him down the Osseo Trail and then utilize a UTV to drive him the rest of the way back to the trailhead. The initial calls came in Thursday morning, and they got back to the trailhead at 6:45 p.m. Lastly, I have work in literally 2 minutes, so this last story, I'm going to post the YouTube video in the description, but a thru hiker was staying actually around the same area up near Franconia Ridge at the Liberty Springs trailhead when there was a problem bear at the campsite. The caretaker was scaring the bear off, but in the middle of the night, the bear clawed through someone's tent, and the bear actually also knocked over the food storage box. So yeah, and the hiker who posted this YouTube video was actually someone that I met down at Trail Days. You might know him, Chris Oconee, and I believe his trail name is Alpha Gal. He was actually in my video where I interviewed hikers at Trail Days. So it was cool meeting him. Super unfortunate that this bear situation happened. I haven't heard of a bear attack on the AT in a while. So just be careful if you're in this area near Franconia Ridge. If you're camping near there, it is so important to take anything with a scent, any food, any lotion, toothpaste out of your backpack. They have bear boxes there for you to use, so just be very, very cautious with that. But that's this video. Those were the crazy rescue stories that have happened this week, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.